Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for being here today. And the one thing I have thought about since sitting here asking my question is how lucky we are. 25 million Australians, we confront the PM face to face, 40 million Ukrainians cannot.
That's right. That's right.
Mr. Prime Minister, I think one of the, perhaps looking at supply chains, slightly different subject, someone who's inherently interested in it. During COVID, one of the outcomes of COVID is that perhaps we realised that Western countries realised that we were very heavily reliant on one country to produce our goods for us. And I think, now moving forward, there's a question to be asked perhaps of, we're still reliant on many of our products and services, particularly our products, our low-cost products, coming from one particular country. So they're coming from China. As our relationship with China continues to develop, it's been a tough one. Clearly, every Australian can see that. How do we ensure that Australians don't lose access to the cheap and affordable products that we rely on from that country? And also equally, can the government do anything to assist business diversify perhaps? Because ultimately, whether it's the government who controls it, whether or not perhaps it's the consumers who end up controlling it, what do you think?
I think it's a combination of both, but what we're seeing in the global economy now is a big shift taking place. And many of the things that China have been producing for the last 10 or 20 years, they're now being produced in Vietnam and other parts of Southeast Asia. And what we've done as a government is to build the relationships with all of those other countries as well, including India. And there are a lot more options. And what we want to see take place is Australians' companies continue to diversify, not to put all their eggs in one basket. I mean, most of the growth in our trade with China, particularly outside the resources sector, only took place in about the last 6 to 7 years. It wasn't always thus. It really surged over the most of last decade. And that was welcome. But at the same time, we have to be careful about a dependence that is created. And this is exactly the point you're making. And it's not just us who've worked this out. This is exactly the same conversation I was having with the Dutch Prime Minister this morning, Mark Rutte. And they're confronting that by becoming too reliant on the Russians for oil and gas and wheat and a range of other things. And here they find themselves in a bind. Now, my message to Europe and my message to Australians is we cannot allow ourselves to become dependent like that. We've faced a lot of coercion from China. Our barley's been targeted, our wine's been targeted, many industries, our crayfish and other things like this. But we've held our ground and we've stood up to it. And that barley has found other markets. And while the wine isn't getting the same price in other places and it's harder, they are going to see this through. And I've been so proud, particularly of Australia's primary producers, who would rather their sovereignty as a country than the coin that comes with becoming over-reliant on one partner who's told you they don't want you involved again anyway. So I think Australian industry and primary producers have shown tremendous courage, but they've also been smart too. And we support them through things like export market development grants and things like that, our trade offices around the world, whether it's in South America or India or other places. Right now, the Trade Minister is working to finalise another one of these export agreements. We put the export agreement in place for the UK, first country to do so. And the other one, which I mentioned to you, is we formed a partnership with what's called the ASEAN countries. Now it's countries like Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on, Brunei. We were the first country in the world to develop such an agreement with that group of countries. We beat China by about a day or so. And what we've always understood that Southeast Asia, when you put all of those economies together, that's a massive partnership for us. One of the first things I had the great privilege to do was finalise the agreement with the Indonesian government, the Closer Economic Partnership Agreement. And that is in place now. And that's dealing with everything from students through to heavy industry and resources. So how you deal with the rest of the world now is really important. It's why you need to make about as much as you can profitably and successfully in your own country. And we're doing that. We're manufacturing mRNA vaccines here in Australia. We've put that agreement in place and many other things. Critical minerals processing, which I'm sure you know a bit about. Critical minerals are the things that end up in your iPhones and all the technology. Now, China has a stranglehold on that global market. And we've been working with the United States, Japan, Germany, India, and a range of other countries to ensure that Australia's critical industries can provide an alternative to those countries.
Countries like India, who shares our
Yes.
value of democracy.
Absolutely.
To deal with someone like India rather than perhaps other options, right?
Supply chains now just aren't about cost and efficiency, they're about trust. And for Australian businesses, you've got to think about the price, the risk of what supply chains you're in and dependent upon. That's just smart business practice. And what we're doing as a government is to provide more opportunities for them to diversify their risk. But if you put all your eggs in one basket, well, it's the same in any business strategy. That's not going to land you in necessarily the best place.
Good